Welcome to our property segment, Real Deal, and today we're going to be looking at the how-tos of renting a place to live in. What do you have to do to come out of the negotiations with budget intact and a place you're happy with? Well, first thing is to become a savvy renter. You've got to avoid the common pitfalls that renters make, and to tell us what exactly those are, we're joined this morning by Hemma from real estate agency SLP Scotia. Thanks for being here this morning. So if you are a first-time renter, where's the first place to start?
I would say the first place to start would be a portal, or forums, because before you actually look for an apartment, you need to kind of gain a bit of information. So the portals and the forums will give you the first introduction. Thereafter, then I would say, it would be good to get in touch with a couple of agents that either you've been recommended or you feel you're going to be comfortable with.
What about setting a budget, though? So, I mean, wouldn't you recommend kind of getting a handle on your finances first,
yes,
or even try to get a sense for what you can afford? Because I know a lot of people that get kind of wrapped up in the location, but then they realize, oh, maybe I'm priced out of that location.
No, you're very right about that. I think the most important thing is to know the budget, because if you do not know your budget, then it kind of leaves you nowhere. So when you kind of know your budget, that helps you kind of streamline which location you should be looking at. If you're looking at something that you think you're going to be priced out, then either you increase your budget or you stick to a different location. So the budget is a very important factor.
I was just reading through some of the questions here, and I gather that some people actually will rent an apartment without even looking at an apartment first.
I'm surprised.
I'm surprised
How
by
can you do that?
But at the same time, there are people, obviously, who live overseas and they need to make that decision from abroad as well. What would you recommend in that scenario?
I've actually encountered that once, where I've had a client who made a call and said, I'm looking for this apartment, can you go and look at, find it for me? So I did the initial search, but they had a friend who was living in Singapore, so I actually...
They were like a proxy?
Yes.
Okay.
So we had, two people giving our opinions. So they actually moved into an apartment or a cluster house actually without even looking at the apartment. I have to say, when I first moved here, you just reminded me, I was in a similar situation where I could only do a one-time visit before I looked at things.
Yes.
But you do recommend at least looking at the place several times, not just the one time.
Well, surely it must be a bit of a warning sign if they say you can only have a one-time visit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you go when the agent is not there. Right? I mean, that's what I was told all the time. Like because the agent obviously has an interest in renting the place out. But
definitely,
if you go at night, you can see what it's like at night. Maybe there's some dogs barking. Maybe there's some, some noise.
It is always good. I would always recommend, most of my clients come in, they spend a few days to view apartments, so I take them to various places, but what I would always recommend is they go and take a look at the place on their own, walk around the surrounding area on their own, so they get a feel of it to see if they're comfortable. So, it is always good to come in and view the apartment, at least once. But a lot of times, because most tenants are expatriates, they tend to make a 2 or 3 day visit to Singapore to view apartments, and a lot of times they lock it down within the 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, quick decision. What are the biggest mistakes you've seen people make?
I would say the biggest mistake is not using an agent, not engaging an agent.
Of course you say that, you're an agent.
I would say, no, but the thing is, I'll tell you the reason why. That's because a lot of times when I have seen tenants, try and take on the role on their, by themselves, do the search by themselves, the process is a lot longer.
Yes.
And when you actually engage an agent, we help to streamline your requirements, we streamline whatever that's not required, and you only see those that really fit your requirements.
It is a sort of difficult situation sometimes. I mean, obviously agents are most familiar with the market, but then agents are often motivated to get the highest price for the landlord. So,
how do you balance that?
Renter, how do you balance that? Yeah.
Okay. Like in SLP Scotia, we have a corporate leasing division. And we focus mainly on tenant management. So most of our clients are tenants, not the landlords. So we really focus on what the tenant requirements are. So it is full representation to our client as a tenant.
But it really has to be the onus on the renter to know what the market prices are. So I don't rely solely on someone telling me what they think it is. It's like doing your own research, isn't it?
Definitely, yes. So you see, when you want to do your own research, one way would be agents will always have apps or tools, to show you. So when you actually view an apartment, and if you really, really like it, you can speak to your agent, or you can go online and look for what the recent transactions are.
Do you have tips for negotiating rents? Because this is a kind of a good market right now.
No, I mean, there's something I really want to ask here that I think is really interesting is, motivated landlords are obviously the ones that are most likely to give you a best deal, because, they're the ones that want to get their properties off their hands. But how do you, I understand you've got some tips on this, how do you tell if a landlord is motivated or not?
Motivated is a good word for desperate. Let's just tell our viewers out there.
Well, it's quite challenging to find motivated landlords, because a lot of times, they are renting the apartments, as an investment. So everyone is expecting to get a fair market value. But I would say couple of questions that tenants can actually ask, either the agent or the landlord. One would be, how long has the unit been vacant for? If the unit has been vacant for a very long time, then either
pitch low.
Or there could be a reason why it's been vacant. The second thing would be to find out what the last offer was, or if there was any last offer. So if there was a last offer and it was close to the asking price, and it was not rented to the person, then you need to find out what exactly happened there.
I know in the U.S., I don't know if you have that here, but in the U.S. market, you could find out whether the rent has been reduced over a certain point of time. So do you have access to that information?
No, but usually it shows up on the website. So if you've been tracking that particular development, if you see, a development that's asking 7,000, negotiable, and then it goes down to maybe say 6.5, negotiable. So if you kind of keep track on it, you will know that it's going down.
Yeah, so I mean, so the tips then for negotiating once you find something that you like?
I would say it really depends on how fast you plan to, rent an apartment. So if it's a vacant unit, then of course the landlord would want the unit to be, occupied as soon as possible. So if you can move in as soon as possible, that is a good negotiating factor. If of course the profile of the tenant, I always try to pitch the profile of my tenant, so that it looks good to the landlord.
They have a good credit rating, they have a stable income, things like that.
Well, I mean, just as on that point, what about when you think about rental budgets? I mean, what are the things you should consider? Because it's not just the cost of the apartment itself per month, is it?
I would say what you need to do is, when you're looking just at the apartment, it's not just the budget that's important. A lot of times you need to know what really your requirements are. So, some of the questions I usually ask my tenants would be, how many bedrooms do you require? And a lot of times Westerners are not used to the size of the Singapore apartments, because they're used
Unless you live in New York.
Yeah.
Like me. Then you know that it's small.
Yes, but a lot of them are used to staying in large spaces. So you need to find out what it would be the minimum requirement of the floor area that they require. Third would be, do you require a partial furnished unit or a fully furnished unit? And the term of the lease. And of course, if a tenant is coming in with a family, in particular with kids, you want to find out where's the office location going to be, where are the children going to be schooling, because then what we can do is to look at all the information and give good advice, and good options as to, okay, based on your budget and based on your requirements, I would recommend that you look at these locations.
You mentioned also the hidden fees of condo maintenance, right? Is that usually packaged into?
It's usually packaged into
the rent. Okay, yes. So it's not something that's additional that you have to be aware of.
So if a landlord requests that at any point, then you should
red flag.
Yes.
Usually it will be stated in the agreement that it's part of the maintenance.
Now, just to veer a little bit off, what if you decide, you move in, you decide that on a place, and then you don't like it? Is there kind of a way out? Can you get out of something? Because I've been in situations where I made a rash decision and then I regret it. So is there anything we can do about that?
Actually, it will be quite difficult, to be honest, because at the end of the day, when you're renting a place, there is a legal obligation between the landlord and the tenant. So if you ever do inquire that, my advice would be to either seek legal counsel or to even ask your agent to seek their legal counsel for advice. But most of the time there is a lock-in period that you need to kind of fulfill.
Yeah, I found that
minimum.
it's about 2 years commitment, and then if you break your lease, obviously this is a very sensitive topic to me, Patrick. I'm probably on the market, but anyway.
All right, well, that is all we've got time for, but thank you very much indeed for those tips. Hemma Sundaram from real estate agency SLP Scotia on the how-tos of becoming a savvy renter and finding the ideal rental property for less.